this be the next classic Star Wars game? Let's find out. Hi and welcome to Tabletop Gaming. My name is Charlie and we are the publishers of Tabletop Gaming magazine, where it's fair to say we're Star Wars fans. I mean, look, this is a Star Wars specific themed issue. It's definitely one you want to check out. I'll pop a link in the description. But today we're taking a first look at this, which is Star Wars: The Mandalorian Adventures, and I am incredibly excited about this, not least as a Star Wars fan, but also because of its epicness. There are a lot of reasons to be excited about this, and I'm going to delve into them, and we're going to take a look inside too. Reason number one to get excited about this game is that it's a Konieczka game. Now, this guy is responsible for designing games like Battlestar Galactica, down to RuneScape, and his board game geek list, just on the things he's worked on, is the stuff of legends. It is incredible. Where I know him best from, though, is his Star Wars games. So the big ones, anything from Star Wars Outer Rim to Star Wars Rebellion. Now that game single-handedly is the reason we have to buy a bigger table. He's back designing games in the Star Wars franchise, and that's where we end up with The Mandalorian. Now in the spectrum of games, Star Wars Rebellion is one of the deeper ones. It's one that it's worth knowing your game stuff. Maybe don't use it as your first game. This is on the other end of the spectrum. Now it's not perhaps like your first game, your party game, that style of things. And I've described this as being sort of like early gamer friendly, but with enough depth to satisfy everyone. Plus, you know, it's Star Wars. So this is the game itself, and as you take a look around, you'll see we've got this sprawling mission map. We'll take a look at that in a second, but it's a good time just to say there are some mild spoilers within this. If you want to know nothing about the maps whatsoever, don't watch this video. There are other ones. We'll talk about it elsewhere. But we'll show you what they look like just to give you an idea of what kind of thing you're going to expect. But we're not opening envelopes. We're not doing anything that's going to ruin the game experience for you. But just your warning. So the game focuses on missions inspired by The Mandalorian Season 1. So they're not quite exactly the same because you're going to be interacting with what's happening, but they are set within that universe. So you're going to see things like similar characters, more on those in a moment, similar missions, we'll show you those in just a second. But as you open the box, you get, of course, your rules, the things that you need to know in order to be able to play. These are beautifully quite straightforward. I find a rulebook intimidating, so let's make the most of a shorter one while we've got it. But the game itself plays through missions. Now, missions are those in line. You start off with this beautiful book that gives you a comic scene. That sets you up for what you're about to do. You then have a flick through, and this is your map. This is your first mission. This gives you all the information you need to know, and it also puts you in certain places. That's why it's spiral bound, so it lays nice and flat on your table. Each page gives you everything that you need to know. So for example, you have what the mission is, you'll have what you need to do, what your win conditions are, and what your fail conditions are, because there's no guarantee you'll manage this. It also has all the spaces you need for extra cards, tokens, and what's going to go where. So it's quite nicely set up. Of course, as you proceed, you end up with a little bit more. You get more flavour, you get more maths to look through, and equally, you'll get more characters to worry about too. So for the first mission, you will need two. You will need IG-11 and you will need the Mandalorian himself. Now, as I say, all of the characters are from Season 1 of Mandalorian, so you've got these characters that we're used to seeing. There's even Grogu in there, but he has a slightly different role. Each of those characters then has their own deck, so you can see what it is, your abilities and things that you're able to do. What that means is you can play quite thematically with the characters that are there. They'll have different actions they can do in line with their characteristics and abilities, and you get to play with those on each one. Now, of those you have 8 to play from, and you'll be told with each mission which ones you need. You can mix it up a little bit, but that's for later. That's the sandbox mode. We'll talk about that in a bit. And nicely, this is a game for 1 to 4 players. So you play cooperatively, or you can play solo. If you want to play a Star Wars game of an evening and you can't get the group together, no problem. Now the setup is actually quite straightforward. All the information you need is included within that initial rulebook to tell you what sort of tokens you've got and where they best go. They have their own spaces on the board, so it's never too difficult, but maybe the first couple of games it's worth keeping it around to see what it is that you need to do. Equally, they've got a video tutorial, so if you're like me and you're not great with rulebooks and would rather someone just talk you through it, the option is there for you. Moving through the box, let's talk about the guide deck. I love a guide deck because it takes you through different things at different points. Turning over a card is quite satisfying to uncover something new. Now in this case, the guide deck will tell you, stop! You do not turn this over until you have played the first game, because you've played your first game, you've figured out the basics that are there. Once you then turn it over, it's going to tell you that there's a little bit more you can do. Here are some new rules, here are some new tactics, here are some new cards. Now as I say, I have no intention of ruining this for anyone, so very briefly, you will get a couple of extra things to do, and you will also get some more cards for the characters in your hand, which means they scale up at the same time you do, before you're told, stop! Go no further. I love this approach to games for a number of reasons, mostly because it scales up with you. So you don't need to front load all of the information, you don't need to spend a long time reading a rulebook before you can get playing, but you learn little dribs and drabs as you go until you realise you've actually learned quite a lot. But I mentioned about opening envelopes, and they are also a part of this. The game comes with these. So these are large envelopes with extra things inside. I will not ruin what's inside, but it is stuff to add into your game. It just makes for a nice surprise. It's always fun to discover something new, and it's even nicer when that's in the game itself. So the question here is, what is the game? Well, you'll have your mission, you'll have something that you need to do. So in the instance of our very first mission, you're going to be playing with IG-11 and the Mandalorian, and you're going to be trying to get the asset. Of course, we know from having watched the Mandalorian, the asset is of course Grogu, but you don't know that at this time. Each turn you'll take 2 actions, and those need to be 2 different ones, but you'll play down your cards to allow you to do something. So, for example, if you were to play down a 3 strength Mandalorian card, in order to move, you would move 3 spaces. And you'll be traversing the board and doing different things as you go. It might be that you need to attack an enemy, in which case you'll need to make perfect provisions for that. But depending on how many cards are in each space depends on what then happens next. So after your action turn, you might be able to resolve a whole event if there's a certain number of cards there, or do something slightly different. It all keeps it going interestingly. The game builds with thematic emphasis in the same way that the TV series would. There's also things like damage and disrupt tokens, and of course, the child himself. There's plenty to play here, so there is tons of bang for your buck. Each mission offers you basically a different game, so you can start and stop in different places, you can try again because it also has different difficulty levels. You can play as a novice, or you can maybe the first time, and then you can maybe scale up to something else. Add to the fact that there's also things like a sandbox mode where you can use characters from any of the others in the mission, so you can mix things up a little bit and try different combinations out. It stops the game from ever getting stale, even if you know what's happening. But of course, there's randomised elements. It's a board game as much as anything else, so you can find certain things. What you have, the choices you make, change the game every time you play. Plus, of course, play solo, play with others. Ultimately, this game feels like something like what Jaws of the Lion is to Frosthaven. Star Wars Mandalorian gives you so much independently. You can start here, have an amazing time, and stay here if you want to. Or you can start dipping deeper into the Star Wars franchise. Ultimately, this is beautifully accessible. This is one I would feel comfortable taking to a wide range of gaming groups without any concerns, whether they're Star Wars fans or not, but especially if they're Star Wars fans. And I think what I love most about it is that it fits into that little space. We have our sort of super light gateway games that we use to get people into the hobby. We have our super heavy games that take a long time to play and a lot of dedication. And then we have those ones in the middle, the ones that are the step up from those very light games and goes, ooh, this is actually like I'm having to use my brain, I'm having to think quite a lot about this. This is really strategic. Oh, that didn't go how I wanted. Can we play again? And the one you keep coming back to, and I think it sits there really, really nicely. Now, if you're interested in seeing more of this game, let me know. I would love to talk more about it, but this has been our very first look. But for today, we've been Tabletop Gaming. Don't forget to check out our magazine. I will pop the links in the description. Don't forget to pick yourself up a copy and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this very exciting new game.